Hello, hello. It's the Japan Zoominar from San Diego. It is March 19th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in California, which makes it March 20th at 8 a.m. And that's a national holiday in Japan, which I actually did not have on my radar. But so everybody in Japan, ohayo gozaimasu. I'm Ulrike Schede, professor and director of JFIT, the Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology at UC San Diego. And I'll have with me today Albert Chu, who will talk to us about the disruption of the insurance industry. Before we start, and to let the audience, give the audience some time to find their seats, let me tell you a little bit about where we are. This is GPS, the School of Global Policy and Strategy. As you can see here, some information. We are a part of the University of California at San Diego. We offer 8 degree programs, including one that is a Master of International Affairs with a Japan specialization. If you're interested in our programs and want to learn more, please visit gps.ucsd.edu. And JFIT is our Japan program, our Japan Center. We do a lot of fun things. If you want to learn more about us, please go to jfit.ucsd.edu. Our events are recorded, and that has 2 implications. The first is you're invited to type in any questions you may have into the Q&A box, and I will try to build it into the conversation Albert and I are going to have. I will refer to you only by your first name to make sure that your privacy is protected. The second implication is that, we have a JZ gallery, which was our library of past events. So you can find links to past events at jfit.ucsd.edu/Zoominar. Our upcoming events, please take a note. We'll have Tim Romero, that many of you may know is behind Disrupting Japan, the LinkedIn group. And he will join us to talk about Japan's venture capital industry today. He's a recently turned venture capitalist. Then on April 30th, I'll have Nobuyuki Oishi, a former student and now Nikkei journalist, on the show. And he will actually interview me on my new book, Shin Nihon no Kei. And then on May 14th, we'll have Noriyuki Shikata, who is Prime Minister Kishida's press secretary. And so we'll hear it from the Kante on this show about Japan economic policy and what's going on in the cabinet office. All right, enough of that. Let me stop the share and introduce our guest, Albert. Hey, hello in Silicon Valley.
Hi, Ulrike. Thank you so much for having me. And I have heard so much about these Zoominars, and I am so honored to be a participant and to share some of our conversations with our guests today.
That's
and
great.
happy spring equinox, right? Which is the holiday in Japan.
Yeah. That's right. I for some reason I did not have that on my radar, but that's okay. We still have audience from Japan here. Good morning. So Albert is the group chief digital officer of SOMPO Holdings, and we'll explain more of what all of this means, actually. It means is he's a board member of one of the largest insurance companies in Japan. That's a shortcut for starters. He's also the CEO of the SOMPO Digital Lab, and we'll talk a lot about that. SOMPO, of course, is an insurance company and is very interested in, finding ways to innovate in a country that is aging and shrinking. So, right there, we have a lot of problems, and then there is the disruption of not only the digital transformation, but AI and Web3. Albert, by background, is perfectly positioned to help SOMPO with this. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford, and also an advanced executive education program from Kellogg, which is Northwestern, of course. He's a Silicon Valley veteran, spent 14 years with Apple from 1982 to 1996. And as I was just joking, Albert, Apple went downhill, has been going downhill ever since. Just a joke, not entirely true. But I saw, Albert, that you wrote the first user manual for Apple, which I think we could just have an entire 1 hour conversation on that just there and then. And then you moved on, and Albert, you told me that you're going to explain how you went from Apple to AT&T and Palm and whatnot. So I don't want to steal your thunder. So let me end my my introduction here. Well, thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you again. And yeah, I was, after graduating from Stanford, as you mentioned, my first job was at Apple. And this was in the early 80s, in 82, when Steve Jobs was there. And as you mentioned, I left in 1996 when Steve Jobs came back. So I was at Apple for 14 years. One of my first products that I worked on was I helped Apple introduce dozens of products, some of which I'm very proud are still in use today, like multimedia products like QuickTime. So they withstood the test of time. And one of my projects was the Macintosh, which we all know. And I helped with the launch of the Macintosh in the Japanese market. Now, this is in 1984, 85 timeframe. Yeah, I just, as a sidebar, you mentioned that I co-authored the first textbook published at that time by Addison Wesley on how to use the Macintosh. It was called Approaching Macintosh, because at Stanford, some fellow students and I had co-taught a class on using the Macintosh. And as you imagine, at that time, personal computers with a graphic user interface with a mouse, pull-down menus, icons, desktop metaphor was completely new. So we had fun writing the book, and it was the first textbook in that area.
So I find that noteworthy, yeah, Albert, because I always thought that the whole plug and play thing was that the Apple products could be used without a manual. But of course, this takes us back in the very early days of how to move a mouse so that.
Yeah, because prior to that, it was a complete paradigm shift, right, in how one operated a computer. In fact, most people at that time didn't have access to a computer, right, and personal computers. And yes, in fact, the challenge that Steve Jobs had given us is he wanted the out-of-box unboxing experience to be so amazing, so perfect, that you fall in love with a Mac. You pull it out, and he wanted somebody to be able to draw something or interact with a computer and print something in 20 minutes. With no instructions. And prior to that, there were manuals. If you ever use VisiCalc, for example, you remember all the manuals and tutorials that were needed and so forth. So our first textbook was basically about 10 different modules. Each one only took 20 minutes and walks you through all the features of Mac Write or Mac Paint at that time. So anyway, those are the old ones. Yeah.
All right. How did you get from the Apple to SOMPO? That's
yeah. So I'll chart the path here for all of us. As I said, my first trip to Japan was related to Apple, and at that time it was in 1984, 85. At that time, Japan was the #2 global economy in the world, and Steve Jobs would tell us that the company he admired the most in terms of innovation and technology was Sony. And in fact, the Macintosh and many subsequent Apple products, we were the early adopters of many, many Sony technologies. The Mac had a floppy disk drive that was 3.5-inch drive, and that was a Sony innovation. And we were the first one to really commercialize it for Sony. Prior to that, the floppy drives were 5.25-inch. Now, of course, we don't even use floppy drives.
I showed my students a floppy disk the other day, and they didn't know what it was.
Yeah, yes. And that
may
was,
I touch it? Or, yeah.
Yeah, that was only 35, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So at that time, though, Japan was the #2 economy. I was basically fresh out of college, first job, land in this country, which was amazing. The technology was so amazing, and the innovations were so amazing, and the economy was so booming, and that made such a seminal impression on me. And I feel like I've been very lucky that ever since then, my career has allowed me to touch Japan almost every year. So we successfully introduced the Macintosh into the Japanese market. We had to localize the product. We had a great team of developers and product managers who created the first double byte operating system and it was called Kanji Talk, which was and had different input methods because, of course, kanji and katakana and different characters were something we had to do. I helped Adobe at that time find a distributor in Japan, localize their products. So it was very seminal time. So moving forward, I was, as I said, at Apple for 14 years. I left Apple to join AT&T. And AT&T, I joined in 1996. And that was when the internet was really taking off. And AT&T realized, AT&T at that time was a very large communications company. At that time in 1996, you may remember, but that we were paying long distance calls and paying 5 cents a minute to make a call. And it was a cash cow for AT&T. AT&T had probably 100 million customers, consumer customers at the time. At that time, not only people were paying 5 cents a minute, we rented telephone sets from AT&T and paid a monthly lease fee for like $10, $15. And so it was a huge cash cow. However, AT&T realized that technology was going to completely disrupt not only their core, backbone, network backbone, but also their business model. And of course, they were right, because today we're doing the Zoominar and hooking up everybody from around the globe at basically no cost. So I was at AT&T for 6 years and really helped usher in the change from the legacy to internet into AT&T. And AT&T started an office here in Silicon Valley. So I was part of the first group of founding members of the AT&T Silicon Valley office. And our role was really to bring technologies from the Valley that were related to internet into AT&T and bring technologies from AT&T out. AT&T at the time had Bell Labs. And so we had some amazing technologies, especially around speech recognition and so forth, and bring that out into the marketplace. In fact, some of my former Bell Labs colleagues from that time are now very well known outside of AT&T in new areas like AI. One of them I see on the news all the time is Jan LeCun, who is head of Meta's AI program. And he, at that time, was at AT&T Labs. So it was really an exciting time. Just like Apple for me was exciting because our vision, our dream, our purpose was to bring personal computing to the reach of everybody. And that has happened. We all have that. At AT&T, our dream was really to usher in the internet age, which of course has happened. And in the 6 years I was at AT&T, I saw the rise of the internet and the bubble burst in the .com types. And that takes me to then my next position. I left AT&T in 2002 to join Palm. And you may remember, I don't know how many people in the audience would know the Palm Pilot, which was an organizer. Yeah. And in the early 2000s, the Palm Pilot, at least in the US, was a dominant product. Everyone had one. You had address book, contact information, notes all in one place, and there was some handwriting recognition system. And what we wanted to do was to spin out the operating system, the OS from the Palm hardware, into a separate company called Palm Source. So I joined Palm in 2002 specifically to work on the spin out of Palm Source, which we successfully did. We became a public company listed on NASDAQ called Palm Source. And what we did was basically two things. One, we licensed the Palm OS to many other hardware vendors in addition to Palm. And we were at the same time really trying to create the new next generation Palm OS, which we believe would be a smartphone OS, because we realized the smartphone is really the base of a smartphone is address book, contactless, all the stuff that Palm could do. And if we added communications, it will become a smartphone. And if you use the Palm, you remember there's also a third-party developer ecosystem of third-party apps that you could download into the Palm Pilot. So that was the idea. And in 2005, we were acquired by a Japanese company. Palm Source is acquired by a Japanese company called Access. And Access at the time was invested by NTT Docomo. Docomo as you may know, and many in the audience would know, was the premier mobile phone company in Japan. This is early 2000s. And in Japan, Docomo had a very profitable product called iMode. And if you ever use the iMode, it wasn't a smartphone at that time. It was a flip phone, a feature phone, they called it. But it had a browser capability called compact HTML. So with the iMode system and the flip phone, you could actually browse the web. You could buy subway tickets. You could read manga, books. Basically, the stuff that you can do, it's kind of an early version of today's iPhone, for example, ecosystem. But it only worked in the NTT Docomo kind of walled garden of iMode. And so it didn't work outside of Japan. So of course, NTT Docomo and Access had the vision of smartphones, and they needed a company that had a broad OS platform that could create a smartphone OS. So they Access acquired PalmSource, the company I was at. And our goal was to create a smartphone OS that will be backed by a carrier like Docomo. And of course, we knew that Apple was working on the iPhone at the time. Google, there was Android that was happening. And we thought that most of the handset manufacturers like Samsung, Motorola, Nokia at the time would not want to, they would want to license a smartphone OS because they wouldn't want to license something from Google because they would be beholden to Google service. However, the business model didn't quite work out that way because Google Android was free. A company like Samsung said, oh, well, that's very attractive. And so they really, the Android really took off, and our poor little Access smartphone OS ended up part of history. But it gave me the learnings and experience. So while I had at Apple the personal computer revolution, the internet revolution at AT&T, the smartphone, mobile phone, internet app revolution, mobile app revolution at PalmSource. And at that time, I decided that I was very tired of the corporate world, and I wanted to do some stuff in the startup area because I was always interested in working with startups. So I became an angel investor in some early startups and really focused on some new technologies around the time and many of the companies I was working with were Japanese startups trying to bring them into the US market because I have, as I mentioned, I've always continued to have touch points with Japan. And I realized that Japan was no longer the #2 economy in the world, but innovation was still there. There was still smart, brilliant innovation and technology. But somewhere along the line, Japan kind of lost its confidence to market itself outside of Japan. And so I thought the startup community in Japan at that time was very fledgling. But however, there were very few angel investors in Japan, and the VCs were, fairly conservative in what they invested in. But there were opportunities, and so I was also looking at how to bring some of these startups outside of the Japanese market. And all along this story here, in 2018 and 19, SOMPO, which, as you had mentioned, is one of the mega insurers in Japan, one of the 3 mega insurers in Japan. You can think of SOMPO as kind of the Allstate or State Farm of Japan. In addition to Allstate, State Farm, SOMPO is international. So we have a global property and casualty insurance outside of Japan. In fact, we're probably in the top 15. And we also have life insurance. And in 2016, acquired a nursing care, built a nursing care business called SOMPO Care. And we can talk more about that later. But SOMPO,
that's special, right? That's very special.
Very special.
The nursing thing, the SOMPO is the only one that does that. Is that
of all the insurance companies, the mega insurance companies, Tokio Marine, MSAD, SOMPO is the only one with the nursing care. And we're now one of the largest owners and operators of nursing care facilities in Japan. And as you know, Japan's a super aging society. So this is a really addressing a large social issue as well that, and we can talk more about that. But basically, in 2016, a former colleague of mine from Access became the first chief digital officer for SOMPO. So he had my job with the role that I have today. And he had the vision of building SOMPO digital labs, which are innovation arms in not only Tokyo, but also Silicon Valley and in Tel Aviv, Israel. And he had asked me at the time in 2018, when the lab was just starting here in Silicon Valley, and I was an angel investor, he had asked me if I could help support SOMPO as a consultant to really introduce the members to the ecosystem here. And in the process of doing that, I got to know SOMPO. And SOMPO had a vision. Our group CEO was Sakurada-san, who, by the way, is retiring at the end of this month. And the group CEO, Sakurada-san, had a vision of beyond insurance, that the insurance industry will completely be changing, and we should disrupt ourselves. And so he really looked at digital and data as some key areas of investment. And so one of the areas that I helped SOMPO at that time, still as a consultant, was to help work on the joint venture with Palantir. So Palantir, back in 2018, 2019, was not a public company. It was a data intelligence, data analytics platform used primarily by government services, especially for Department of Defense, very, very advanced at the time. And we—
They were an early AI player, right?
They were, but at that time it was
big data at the time.
Yeah, it was really big data before AI is as well known, as before generative AI came into being as it is now. But yes, they applied a lot of AI principles to their data, to their big data. And so we did a joint venture with Palantir in Japan. We formed Palantir Japan, which is 50% owned by SOMPO, 50% owned by Palantir. And I helped work on that deal. And that was when I realized, wow, this is a company that's really putting money behind their words. And in 2020, I was offered, this is in the middle of COVID, I was offered the opportunity to join SOMPO as the CEO of SOMPO Digital Lab. And then later I became the group chief digital officer for SOMPO Holdings. So here we are. So I know this took a little while, but I hope this was of interest. At least it gave you a sense of why Japan and why I believe so much and continue to believe that Japan now more than ever will have an opportunity to reemerge in the world stage and regain maybe some of the innovation that Steve Jobs had said he so much admired.
Yeah. Thank you. And it does actually help us understand what's happening here, right? So this is an insurance company, and most people think of insurance as a really stodgy old business, and then it's in nursing, so that's old people. So many people think about that as a really old, stodgy business, and yet here you are running a digital lab. And so let's talk a little bit about insurtech, right? I think that's the digital transformation term in the United States that we use for the disruption of insurance.
Yes.
So the insurance industry is one where there's this contract, and I buy a house, I insure my house. There's some insurance rate, which is, really just an approximation of what houses in my neighborhood do, or what people like me do with the houses or something. But there's this huge big data disruption of how insurance companies think about risk and premium and how they're doing their business. Let's start with that before we get into the aging thing, because I think the aging follows from that, right? So let's talk about what is AI doing to the insurance business?
Yeah, great. Actually, at least multiple ways, but I'll highlight two. First, you touch upon big data, and what is happening now in the insurance business is, as the world is progressing, we're becoming more digital. Data is becoming more and more plentiful. So, for example, we insure cars in Japan. we have about a third market share in Japan of consumer drivers. Cars are now becoming more and more connected. So there are, of course, EVs, which now gather so much data, right? If you drive a Tesla or any EV, you know there are lots of cameras everywhere, lots of sensors, and guided driving, and it's collecting data all the time. But even if you don't drive an EV, modern cars now are more and more called connected cars. Lots of sensors, lots of computing power, and so forth in your car. And all this data is being captured. For example, it knows exactly your acceleration speed. It knows, where you're turning. It knows with GPS, it would know exactly where you're driving. When you're driving, it will know what radio station you're listening to at what part of your drive commute. Things that you didn't even know are being captured, So all this data now belongs to the car company. The OEM car company has access to all of this data. Ironically, in Japan, unlike here, in the US, if you're a car geek, you would know there's something called the OBD port, where it's in your car. And if you plug it in, you can download some of the data about your car. But in Japan, the OBD port is not accessible by the consumer. It's only accessible by the dealer and the OEMs. So what is happening is that cars are becoming more connected, more and more data, especially as we move to electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. All this data, it will end up being more data that the insurance company would even have. Like, we don't have access to that data. So in many ways, what's happening is that car companies can, in the future, become better insurance companies than we can, because they have the data. They don't have the background, they don't have the model, and they're not regulated to do insurance. But here in the US, you can buy insurance from Tesla. If you have a Tesla will sell you car insurance. So that is a trend that is happening, and that's all being caused by data. And of course, we can add AI on top of that, and there'll be more and more analytics, and behavioral science can help you drive better. And in theory, it can all be used for good, and it will make you a better driver, safer streets, better cities, and so forth. On the other hand, because there's so much data, there's also the opportunity for malicious issues, attacks and things that will happen to it. So that's something that is happening. That we can't avoid. So part of what we are trying to do with AI and with data is, one, how can we, SOMPO, and as the insurance industry, be smarter about how we create insurance products for our customers as we move forward, because the world has changed quite a bit. And secondly, I think there is going to be, and this gets to my premise, that there are two disruptive technologies that are coming down the horizon, which will change our industry. One is AI, and that's happening now, and it will only continue to happen in more accelerated pace. And the other is blockchain and Web3. And if you have read about, I'm sure the audience has read about Web3 and blockchain, it basically, one of the key tenets of it is that it democratizes the access to data. So if data is put into a blockchain, it is available and accessible in theory by everybody. It's open. And so today, the data, as I mentioned, for the cars are now controlled by the car OEM. But in the future, it could very well be, with Web3 coming in, blockchain technologies, that all this data should belong to the driver, because the driver is the originator of that data, and be able to say, okay, I want my data to be shared with the insurance company, or I want my data to be shared with some other things for societal good, etc., instead of large tech companies controlling the data. And you already see that tension very much with Facebook and Amazon and Google, where today all these companies are making profits, huge profits, off of our data. And I personally believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be a change. Part of it will be driven by legislation, and part of it will be driven by technology. So that will affect our industry quite a bit.
So, and as an insurance company, then the play becomes they're making sure that you're part of the equation. Whatever happens, that you're part of, that you're one of the players, or how does that?
Yeah, and so
what's the connection?
So one of the roles of SOMPO Digital Lab is to understand and explore, AI technologies, Web3, blockchain technologies, and see what opportunities there are in our respective industries, insurance and nursing care, where we can basically maybe create new products and services that leverage AI and blockchain to develop a better insurance product, or to develop a better nursing care product. AI is also used for operational efficiency use. So today, a lot of our practices, kind of back-end operations for insurance, are very manual. If you were, let's say, to buy commercial insurance, you usually go through a broker, and the broker would submit, all your data to the insurance company like SOMPO. So we get all sorts of data of a potential customer, a potential client, via all sorts of things like emails and spreadsheets and photos, photos of a property and spreadsheets. And then we have data from public sources, like government sources, about where the property is located, geographical images, geospatial images. AI can now take in all this data, sort it in a it used to be a manual process, and we would have an underwriter do it. And it will probably take hours to, sort through all of this and then come up with kind of a quote of what this insurance policy should be. The AI now can be a co-pilot for this underwriter and take all this data and be able to, in minutes instead of hours, put it into the same format that would have normally taken the same underwriter a long time to do. And the underwriter can review it and make changes to it and say, oh, yeah, no, based on my experience, I would actually rate this differently, et cetera. And so therefore it increases the operational efficiency, the productivity of our underwriters, and ultimately, I think, providing a better quality of service to our clients. So that's one example of AI. So AI is today extremely helpful for our operational efficiency and back-end operations.
So my understanding is also that, to put a positive spin on what data can do for all of us, it rewards good behavior, right? So first of all, if I'm a good driver, then my rates will go down. They already do that, but now, presumably the insurance company can fine-tune that much more. And then also, if my house is in a flood zone,
yeah,
even if it sits on a rock, but if it's in a larger flood zone, right, then I'm punished. But now with a much more specific data, the insurance company presumably knows that, my house is on a rock, but everybody else will get flooded. And so I don't have to pay for flooding, and so presumably we can get rewarded for better behaviors, and therefore also people will hopefully behave better. So Matt actually has a question whether the Japanese government has responded to your use of big data. What's the regulatory part of this? Right, the government is watching what you're doing there. Are they changing the way they're regulating this industry?
The very good question. As Matt points out, the insurance industry is very regulated. So we can't very rapidly create new products because they have to go through regulatory approval. And in Japan, especially, it takes a fairly significant amount of time in the past. So, however, I think the regulators are really looking out, I think, mostly for our consumer interests and protecting, our interests. And so I think as more and more data becomes available, they can probably react faster as well. But so I would say the answer to the question is regulators are very well aware of all the data sources and the new data analytics that's coming in. They are, cautious. So we would create new products and we would have to submit them to the regulator and they would have to approve it. But then they see all the data that's backing up our claims, our models, and hopefully that will help accelerate some of this. Yeah, so it's probably slower than what most of us would like. It's because it's regulated. It's not like a private tech company that can throw out a new product without any regulation, basically. So it's happening. And maybe this could be a segue to our nursing care business.
Yes, I was just going to go there.
Yeah, because
that's interesting.
as I said, we own and operate one of the largest chain of nursing care facilities in Japan called SOMPO Care. We have over 400 care facilities, over 80,000 residents. And even though we're one of the largest, we're only 1.5% market share. So it shows that the nursing care industry in Japan is very fragmented. And if we want to, and by the way, nursing long-term care insurance is it's a national, there's national long-term care insurance in Japan. So in essence, everybody's guaranteed a spot in a nursing care facility at some point in time. And so because of that, it's also regulated. And what we're doing with our SOMPO Care business unit is we have, for example, taken data of all of our residents. We bought 80,000 smart beds. So now we know for every resident that's in our nursing care facility, how well they slept at night, how many times they got up to go to the bathroom, what their REM and deep sleep and all that was. We also have data about what foods they ate, what is their activity level. So basically we have like a 360 view of our residents' daily life. The caregivers also input information and say this is what they did for caregiving, etc. And based on all of this data, we have used the Palantir Foundry platform to create a solution which has created operational efficiency for our nursing care facilities. So it reduced the time that it takes our caregivers in the nursing care facilities to do the same tasks by almost 20 to 25%. They can do it more efficiently because, and some of it is using some predictive analytics. So for example, it used to be that they would, at a certain schedule, they would go to every resident and check if they wanted to go to the bathroom. But however, now that we have very custom data, we will know, oh, this person went to the bathroom at this time, usually goes to the bathroom after so many hours. So we don't need to check on this person until later. And so that little tweaks like that add up. And at the end of the day, our caregivers now are 20 to 25% more efficient. And in Japan, because the nursing care is a regulated business, there's a rule, which is there's one caregiver for every 3 residents. That's the rule, the regulated rule. And so we're now petitioning the Ministry of Health to change that rule based on the data that we're showing, evidence that we're showing, and we're doing a pilot together with them to show that if they use the Palantir system that we are using, you can move from 1 caregiver to 3 to maybe 1 to 4, or maybe 3.2 or 3.5. So, slowly move that way. So this is a long answer to Matt's question that yes, regulators are aware of data. It will take time to change. I think the nursing care is a good example where we are seeing progress slowly, but they're doing it, as we said, deliberately and cautiously, but they're moving in the right direction. And I think that over time, they will see how they'll have more confidence and be able to move more rapidly.
So, this is amazing. I mean, you had me at smart bed, right? Sort of, wow, I want to get old in Japan because there's all of this attention paid to what happens. So when I first heard about SOMPO buying nursing homes, I thought this was not the best of ideas. I couldn't see the strategy behind it. And I had the pleasure of meeting Sakurada-san at one point, and then it made a little bit more sense, right? So lots of old people, we're selling insurance contracts to them. So why not sell them the nursing home? But the data aspect of this is super interesting because you probably also learn something about their family members,
Yes.
future buyers of insurance
Yes.
contracts, and
So
that's
there's a
kind of
lot. Yeah. So I think today we have SOMPO Care, which is really looking at, I would say our average customer age is probably in their 70s and 80s. We have Himawari Life, which is our life insurance. So it's more 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. In SOMPO Japan, I believe our insurance base, the average age is pretty high. It's probably in the 40s, if I'm around that. So I think our goal is to really offer a suite of complete products that target, from 40s on to 80s, so that and using data, we can really custom tailor some of that for sure. But
That's
the other
amazing.
exciting thing, Ulrike, is that I believe that the aging, whether if you're elderly in Japan or elderly in Germany or in the US or Great Britain, there are certain things which are basically human. There are these things called ADL, activities of daily living. And that's pretty much a standard around the world. So there's like, I don't know, 7 or 8 ADLs. One of them is toileting, another is medication management, another is meal preparation. These are activities of daily living, which over as you age, it starts to degrade. And if we can collect data about all of this, and we can add some AI to do some, prediction and prevention, our goal is that we can help people to live as independently as possible before having to go to a nursing care facilities. So just like Sakurada-san, who you met, probably said, he would like to disrupt the insurance. We also would like to we created a nursing care business to disrupt it. And what we really want is that the people who go to our facilities only go at the very end of life, and that they can, have a very peaceful time at that time. But before then, they live as independently as possible. And that through the help of technology. And because, as I mentioned earlier, the nursing care business is very fragmented. Most of them are mom and pop shop type of owners, right? Most of them are small chains of 4 or 5 or less. They cannot afford smart beds. They cannot afford technology. So one of the things that we bring to the nursing care industry in Japan is be able to share what we're doing with Palantir and SOMPO Care and create a SaaS product, a software as a service product, that we can sell to the rest of the nursing care industry on a per resident per month basis, so that they don't have to make the huge investment in Palantir like SOMPO did up front. That's our hope, that's our dream. And the SOMPO Digital Lab is there to support our business units to realize this opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, absolutely, of course. So let's go to the digital lab. The digital lab looks at aging, of course, but it also is your crystal ball, right? So you're looking at, okay, what are the future trends and what's out there? So what do you see when you rub your crystal
Well,
ball?
we're
you can tell us, I guess, but give us a few ideas of where you're looking.
You know that I'm not a futurist when I say that my predictions are not perfect, because I'm sure futurists will not say that. But clearly, I think the obvious, the world is going through tremendous changes. What Sakurada-san used to call VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, change and
complexity and ambiguity.
Ambiguity, exactly. Yeah. And very good. And in this world we live in, all this is happening through climate change. That's a reality that's happening, and that will affect our industry and our lives. So one of the things that the labs is doing is looking at what are some of the innovations that are happening in climate tech that we should be not only following, but maybe participating or leading and leveraging for our companies. Another is, of course, aging society. Japan is a super aging society, but beyond Japan, as you know well, there are many other countries following suit, especially developed countries, and then even countries like China, which has a large population, or even the US with a large baby boomer population now aging, this becomes a social issue as well. A third one is cyber attacks, cybersecurity. I think we are seeing this, it's happening already a lot. We may not realize it, but it will only continue to get worse, especially as AI becomes more pervasive and people are smarter. And then so things like cybersecurity, even deep fakes and other things that you see in the news, are going to be more and more problematic. So these are some of the things that we are monitoring, that we are experimenting with, and we're trying to harness some of these new technologies to be used by our businesses. As I said earlier, I believe the two technologies that are disruptive are AI and Web3. And those are areas that or AI is already happening. We're already harnessing AI to do operational efficiency gains, et cetera. And blockchain and Web3 is now gaining momentum. It was moving very quickly a few years ago, and then there was all these different scandals and so forth in the crypto world. But I think that has now died down, and I think people realize that the fundamental technology of blockchain is sound. And so that it will really eliminate a lot of it will produce more transparency, more security, and make things safer at the end of the day. For example, cross-border payments and other things like that.
So you mentioned earlier the auto insurance example. And so the disruption for the insurance industry, really, if I see it correctly, is that anybody can offer insurance. And anybody who knows how I behave on a daily basis can offer me insurance, because this monopoly on this information, this knowledge of of how to assess the premium properly is going to be wiped out by AI, right? So if Toyota may well become an insurance company.
I wouldn't be surprised if all the OEMs are thinking, is this a new source of revenue? And I think Tesla and many others have paved the way. However, we are lucky in the insurance industry that we're regulated. So while everybody thinks that they can have even Tesla, when they are now offering insurance, they had to get regulated, and they had to initially they had to work through the normal channels. They white labeled, some companies, insurance products, etc. And so, yes, to the end user, it seems like it's Tesla insurance, but at the end of the day, it's a regulated business behind the scenes. So in a sense, the insurance industry is lucky, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it feels so stodgy, is because change, takes time, but it's all for the protection of the consumer. So yes, you're right. Anyone can be an insurance company, but to get the regulatory approval, not everyone will be able to get that. However, one thing that you brought up, we are already experimenting with that in Japan. It's peer-to-peer insurance. So in Japan, the auto insurance is different than here in the US. There is compulsory mandatory insurance that you have to buy. And then there's some deductible, right, that you pay out of pocket. Simplifying this, that's deductible out of pocket is not significant, maybe up to $1,000, let's say. We are offering a trial product that's a peer-to-peer insurance. So basically, you pay a premium to cover the $1,000. It'll be less than the $1,000, but your amount of premium is pooled with, 100,000 other peers. And together that pool can cover you for the $1,000 in case you get into accident. Of course, we now do all the models to make sure that you don't have to, that you pay the right amount. And if there's extra, there's a dividend at the end that can be maybe paid back to you or rolled forward. So that maybe leads a little bit more to everyone can be an insurance agent, type of thing, because you're basically paying a small amount with your peers to self-insure, but it's run by an insurance company in the background like SOMPO. And this is a project that is from one of our more innovative businesses inside SOMPO Japan called MyInsurance, which does micro insurance. And micro insurance is also regulated, but it's more lightly regulated. So
I was just thinking about the business strategy, right? So you have this current core business, which is nicely regulated, and it creates all the cash flow that you need to you play with these new ideas. But it's super interesting how so you can do this for a while. So you're safe for a while, but eventually that the governments will probably allow more competitors in, and it'll be harder and harder, I guess. So we have questions coming in from the audience. I want to bring them in. The first is a super tech question. So let's not go too much into the weeds of this. But the question is, what's the role of major corporations like SOMPO in a decentralized Web3 world? I'm not even trying to fully understand what that means, but it probably means that if everybody has access to all the data, which is basically what I was just thinking, what can a large company like SOMPO contribute or do?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very pertinent, a very smart question, whoever asked it, because that's one of the things that we're looking at SOMPO Digital Lab. In the decentralized world, data ownership will change. And what is SOMPO's role? So one of our roles could be, I don't have the answer. One of the roles could be that we help organize, if you will, make sense of all the data that's out there. And it doesn't mean we control it. It just means that we help, organize it. And because, every one of us is generating so much data. For example, when we drive, if we got a data dump every day, we wouldn't know, it's not meaningful to us, right? We wouldn't know how to use it, how to organize it, et cetera. I mean, that's one. So how can we can be helpful to do that? Another role of ours is to create new products and services that are decentralized products, so that the data that you generate can be used for your benefit. So it can help reduce your insurance rates and stuff like that. So today, so I think we are really looking at how it is that in a decentralized world, what could be our different roles, and that's a very pertinent question. So
create meaning. Yeah, so create meaning in the big data world, I guess. It's like so that leads to Jill's question, which actually I've been thinking about this entire time listening to you too. She's wondering that it's really scary that medical records are kept digitally, and then there are all of these cybersecurity breaches that you already alerted to, right? And then there's facial recognition, which there's all of this, that allows for discrimination and all kinds of things. So in this decentralized Web3 world, how are we safe from from abuse of these technologies?
Right. I think it's again a very critical question. I guess the belief I believe that in a Web3 or in a blockchain world, blockchain are encrypted, they're distributed. So today the data that is in a electronic health record, EHR, is not decentralized. It's actually centralized somewhere, right? So if you go to a hospital, they use a system like Epic here in the US, and it's all centralized. In a decentralized world, one scenario is all this data is put onto blockchain. It is encrypted, so nobody can see what the data is. It's distributed, so nobody has the full access to it. If one node fails, there's others that are there. So it's a much safer. So
the ransomware cybersecurity attacks will go away.
Will diminish if that's my view of it. Today, ransomware, all that happens because everything is, they attack a central place. So but however, the Web3 world is not here yet, and it's what I would call Horizon 3, meaning probably 8 years away. Who knows? So right now we are living in a world where there is a lot of technology innovation, AI, in data intelligence, and there's a lot of attacks on cyber, et cetera. So that is true, and that's why I had mentioned earlier, this is one of the things we're looking into, is what are some new technologies we have in cybersecurity that we could be tapping for our businesses. But as most people know, cybersecurity primarily has been a cat and mouse game. So as you chase something and squash one down, something else pops up. So
whack-a-mole thing.
Yeah, like a whack-a-mole. So yes, there is always this fear of a big event happening.
So I'm looking at the clock. We have time for one more question. And Jenny asked, isn't that this actually, I like this because it takes us back to the initial insurance idea. So Jenny's question is, beyond using our data to develop new models and all of that, are you as an insurance industry trying to improve our safety from these data breaches, right? So can you actually insure customers for data or identity theft?
Yeah, we have, as an industry, have something called cyber insurance. So what we do is we not only, in case of a breach, we will pay out, but also we help. Part of this is to help the companies that we insure have safe data security, right? Safe data hygiene, as we call it. For individuals, there are companies that provide individuals cyber, insurance security. Yeah, but again, I think it's a little bit of cat and mouse. It's not going to the root problem, and I honestly, that's one of the reasons why I believe that blockchain Web3 will be one of the areas of future interest for everybody, but not everybody is quite there yet.
Okay, we had one last question come in and then we'll end, and it's Yuma. And Yuma asks, what would you recommend university students do or study to keep up with this rapidly changing world? It's a perfect final question for you.
Yeah.
So what should they study?
I think one is you should absolutely don't be scared of these new technologies. Use them. Try out AI, try out ChatGPT, try out all these different models. Buy crypto, understand how that works, and read about it. There's a new book that recently came out by Chris Dixon called Read, Write, Own, which I think is a book that I've been recommending to everybody about Web3 and the upcoming kind of revolution of Web3. So just be part of it. Don't feel scared about it, but rather participate in it. And I hope that as a student, you will be one of the leaders in helping us create a better society through these disruptive technologies. And that's just to round it off. I mean, I feel very fortunate to have gone through 3 major disruptions in technology, right? Personal computing, internet, mobile technologies. I feel the next one that's coming is AI, data, Web3, blockchain. And I think for all these university students, that's their journey. If they participate in that, that would lead on to other very interesting things.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Albert, for joining us today. It was wonderful to have you. And audience, thank you for being with us. The next Japan Zoominar will come for sure. We'll have Tim Romero on the lineup talking about Japan and disrupting and venture capital and innovation. We'll stay with that theme for a little bit. But I hope you do well until then and have a great holiday in Japan today and a great spring in the United States. Thank you, Albert. And
thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.